life unfiltered. So when talking about living life unfiltered, it first helps to build a little bit of context. So let's just do a quick recap of what we went over last week, where the topic, the focus was, who am I? And we did a little bit of deductive reasoning to conclude I'm not the body, I'm not the mind, I'm not the intelligence. Rather, I am something else. I'm an eternal soul. And these different elements, the body, mind, and intelligence, are there to serve the soul. They're facilities for the soul to interact with this world around us. And one of the points that we talked about is the rationale of that understanding. And we were left trying to understand why it's so hard to live life on the level of the soul rather than the body, even if we can just deduce that I am not these things, but many times, and I can speak in first person for this, I'm living life for the pleasure of my body or the pleasure of my mind, whatever it might be. So we left off with that, just kind of an open question on why this might feel like a struggle. And to understand that struggle a little bit better, we're now going to talk about the filtered and unfiltered life. So let's start with two questions that can give us a little bit of insight and maybe just get the thoughts going in this direction. The first is, I just want to hear from you, what is free will? What does free will mean to you?
No, free will means no restrictions. We can do whatever we want.
Okay. Can do whatever you want. Okay. I'm just taking a few notes. All right. Vaishali, did you want to add anything? What does free will mean to you?
Like, yeah, we make our choices.
Okay. We make our choices. All right. And do you think then that we have free will? If the definition of free will that you're both establishing is we make our choices, we can do whatever we want. If that's the definition of free will, do we have free will?
Yeah, actually, we do choices, I feel like.
Yeah.
But I don't think we can do whatever we want always.
What's your thought on that?
I don't know. Like,
Like we can desire anything, but to fulfill that, we have some limitations. We can't
Okay.
do everything because sometimes it is beyond our conception also.
Okay, so that's an interesting nuance that's being brought up. Free will, sense of desire can be there, but whether or not we can satisfy that or express that desire is another story. That's what I'm hearing. Is that right?
Yes, Vijay.
Okay. Okay. No, these are good thoughts. And so this brings us to the topic of synthesizing who am I and living life unfiltered. So let's just take a look at some pictures. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Just give me a second. Oh, it's not open. Give me a second. Let me know when you can see my screen.
yes.
Okay. I'm going to show you a series of images and tell me what you see. What do you think it is? A piece of felt, a microscopic image of an atom? Like, it's okay. It's okay. Yes.
Satellite image is something, I don't know.
Oh, what?
Satellite image?
Okay. Satellite image of what?
Yeah.
Moon?
Okay. Okay. Sure. Okay, I'm going to show you another image now, okay? What does that look like to you? And this is not like a psychological examination where like, oh, if you think this, then da-da-da-da. You know, it's a bit of fun. What do you see here? Close-up of somebody's head of hair.
Might be a reflection on water.
Okay, reflection of water. Okay.
Oh,
What do you see? Do you see water also? Do you see something else?
I don't know. It looks like, for me, it's like painting, which I couldn't understand.
It's like what? Oh,
Painting.
painting. Okay. Okay. Last image. What does this look like to you?
Sky?
Okay.
Deep sea.
Okay. Now this is the big reveal. It's all images of the sun with different filters.
uh,
Isn't that amazing?
yeah.
So depending on how we are looking at the same object, in this case the sun, we may see different things. And
Hmm.
even look at the expression of the characteristics. So this first image that we looked at, it looked like a lunarscape or a piece of cloth or something on an atomic level, those black and white electronic microscope images that you may sometimes see. And then this one, it looks like, marbled something, or, it very well could be anything. And then the last one, yeah, absolutely, deep sea or Neptune or sky, or who knows what it is. But this is all the same object, the sun, just being looked at from different filters. And so the reason that I'm showing that is to just point out that we talk about free will as having a certain set of desires, like I can do whatever I want, or being able to make my choices, my own choices. But with this example of the sun, where there's filters changing our perspective of certain situations, what is our capacity for free will? When we say this is my desire, is that really my desire? So we'll just think about that a little bit, and we'll continue and revisit this as well. So what happens when we see things through filters?
We have our own perspective of seeing the things. Like it may not be that, but we assume that it's like that and all kind of things. Yeah.
Yeah, it becomes a little tricky because the true situation is obscured or distorted, and at the same time, because I rely on my senses, my mind, to interpret what the senses are giving me as input, I become convinced that this is what it is, even if it may not be the case.
Mm.
And so what are some different things that create these filters in our vision? Like, what are some things that influence, let's say now, taking a little bit broader perspective than just a picture of the sun, influences our cultural norms, our sense of beauty, our sense of what foods are nice or not nice? Like, what kinds of things influence that?
like experience, maybe, like for example, we have experienced something.
Mm-hmm.
So if that same situation occurs, we have that in mind, that okay, they again same thing will happen, that kind of.
Mm.
So experiences.
Might be because of associating with different kind of peoples, we get their views on our perception.
Mm-hmm. Now, just to get appreciation for this variety of views, I just want to quickly show an image, one particular sense of beauty. You can see the image. So this is an expression of beauty and wealth for a particular tribe in Myanmar.
Yeah, we are able to see.
Okay, where from a very young age, these rings gradually get added, pushing the shoulder structure down to elongate the neck. Or in other cultures, like in older imperial China, it was feet binding. Or even in a modern context, there's a very particular aesthetic of what male beauty or female beauty looks like. So evolving tastes. And so there's so much variety. There's cultural influences, media influences, and well, when I say cultural, there's like the rooted environment we grew up in, then there's the association we keep today. So all these different influences that help to shape these filters that in affect our outlook in life. So how we perceive different situations, different people, even affects the kinds of things that we notice in a particular situation. So within that variety, different personalities, different tastes, I like this, I like that. And this all comes down to, from the Vedic perspective, of the description of the three modes of nature. So they describe, the three modes are characteristics of, characterized by goodness, by passion, and by ignorance. And we can look at these different filters rather than what we saw earlier with the picture of the sun, where it's specific wavelengths that are being captured in that image. These are different kinds of more subtle filters that affect our interests, our personality, what we value in life, how we respond or react to a situation, how we live our lives, and how we see everything around us. So in these three modes, we'll just do a little bit of a breakdown of what goodness, what passion, and what modes of ignorance are, or some of the characteristics of those modes, and then explore this topic a little bit further. So the characteristics of goodness are one way, well, we can first look at this through the lens of a tendency. So activities characterized by goodness tend to be like poison in the beginning, but sweet at the end. So it's a long-term vision. And the person or thing predominated by goodness filter, we'll call it, tends to find happiness through long-term pursuits, intellectual pursuits, is considered more thoughtful, patient, tolerant. There's wisdom. There's inherent happiness in knowing things, and qualities like altruism, just from a self-fulfillment perspective. And a text that I'm going to refer to fairly often, the Bhagavad Gita, in chapter 14, talks about this mode of goodness as the manifestation of the mode of goodness can be experienced when all of the gates of the body are illuminated by knowledge. So the predominating quality of goodness is driven by knowledge. Now, something that may be more common to us as either working professionals or college students there might be elements of the mode of passion. So we're active, we want to create, we want to make things happen, we want to change the world. And the Bhagavad Gita talks a lot about that by saying, O chief of the Bharatas, when there is an increase in the mode of passion, the symptoms of great attachment, fruit of activity, intense endeavor, and uncontrollable desire and hankering develop. So a few interesting points here that are raised. Great attachment, fruit of activity, intense endeavor, uncontrollable desire. What does that life look like? Like, what are some symptoms that we may see in everyday life, or if you have examples that might look like that? And if it's not so clear, there's a little bit of an exercise that I've planned next. Okay, well, we can table that and get back to that idea. And the last one is ignorance. So ignorance, in the 13th verse, it says, when there is an increase in the mode of ignorance, O son of Kuru, darkness, inertia, madness, and illusion are manifested. Now, just curious, what is your take on what is meant by madness and illusion? Like, oh, go ahead.
Yeah, illusion means we don't see things as it is.
Okay, definitely illusion, yeah. And why madness, though? That sounds, I mean, it might sound pretty extreme, like, oh, only crazy people are, you know, somebody that we'd, I guess, by social standards consider crazy are in the mode of ignorance. Like, what is meant by that word madness? Do they get angry a lot? Or?
Like madly engaged in some activities like drinking, maybe.
But why would that be mad? Most, you know, many people do that.
Maybe it's uncontrolled.
Oh, I can control it. I hold my liquor really well. Somebody... And just for the record, I don't drink, but but what, you know, what would you say to that? Like, why would in the category of madness? So one of the things we can look at is,
I think Akhilesh wants to say something.
Oh.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. I was going to say, like, normally when people are in ignorance or they don't know a fact, we can call them madness and illusion because they're not trying to find out the true meaning behind something. It's not about spirituality or any like, I guess, like political situation. If it is, people don't try to find out the meaning behind what's happening, so it can be like madness and illusion or something.
Okay, that's an interesting perspective on the idea of madness, of just the quality of inertia, just not wanting to move from where I am, and not trying to understand things more deeply, possibly as they are. So like the last talk of who am I? Nah, that's okay. I don't really need to know. I'm fine living day to day. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And another way to look at the idea of madness, and it's tied to illusion as well, is ignorance is characterized by things like escapism, a sense of helplessness, or always planning and dreaming, but never doing anything. And ignorance can be summarized as it's poison in the beginning and poison at the end. And so let's just take a quick discussion on the side effects of, let's say, alcoholic beverages, where for most people, consuming alcohol results in impaired judgment, possibly impaired even vision or level of displaying consciousness. And so those are side effects of it. And so from many perspectives, what we look for in ourselves as a person, how we conduct ourselves in public, and what we're striving for, like if somebody says be on your best, the side effects of drinking alcohol probably wouldn't be a part of that picture, but many people still engage in that. So it's a light form of self-destruction. And so the idea is, why would you want to do something that you know doesn't really have any benefit? I'm not usually going to make great choices when I'm impaired, but I still do that to myself. So why? What's the point? And let's explore these concepts. This is more just an intro to the three areas. But I want to give an example and just hear your thoughts. So in this example, and we're going to analyze this from the modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. In this example, I find out today that I have a big project due in 7 days. What do I do? Now, the nice thing is there's 3 of you. So one of you can be goodness, one of you can be passion, and one of you can be ignorance.
I'll be ignorance.
I'll be passion.
Okay, I guess you're goodness by default. Okay, so you get an assignment today saying that you have a major project due in 7 days. This is the first you're hearing about it. So start with goodness. What do you think you'll do when you hear that?
Okay, I always face these situations in my company. But okay, I don't think it was always in mode of goodness. We handled it.
Let's pretend. Let's pretend. This is purely for illustration purposes.
Yeah.
Professional.
So okay, so now this is based on my experience. I remember we always have a deadline, like this date target. We have to finish something like that. And let's say we have less resources. That is always the condition, like situation. And then we will just force engineers to, like, we have to complete it. Like including myself, I worked, I remember, but I don't think
well, let's talk about a school project, because it'll be a little more individual and something. I'm just looking for like how you would possibly see that situation. So let's review really quick just some of the characteristics of goodness, passion, ignorance. So goodness is about thoughtful, consistency,
caring.
happiness, and knowledge. Passion is about action, creation. Let's make things happen right now. And then it's more like helpless or escapist or dreaming.
Goodness is like you will properly plan and not in like everything at every step. It's well documented.
Yeah, everything to the T. You'd break it down. You'd plan out how much work you need to do, and then spread it over your
Yes.
stick to it, and then get it done.
Yes. Good planning is, I think, mode of goodness.
Well, let's hold that thought, because I'm pretty sure Adolf Hitler was a pretty good planner. All right, we'll hold on to that thought. Let's revisit that. Next, passion, you're on.
Like I will do it, like I'll somehow or other finish it day and night without sleeping or anything like that, and like finish it before time. That's passion.
Yes. And while you're finishing, or before you start that project and do that all-night marathon you just described, you'll probably do 50 other things before that.
Yeah.
Whereas goodness, you might say no to a few social engagements in order to finish your responsibilities as a student. But passion, you'll do everything. And Akhilesh, ignorance. Let's hear you.
First, I'll think, is this good for me? And I'll not do it regardless if it's good for me. I'll hear it in one ear and leave it out in the other. And then at day 6, I might start planning. And at day 7, I'll just copy from someone else and give a lackluster effort to it.
Assignments.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. All right. Yeah. That's a very nice description. Okay, so we get the ideas, I think, or at least some of the concepts. But then, Vaishal, you introduced this idea of like a specific act of planning associated with goodness. So that starts to bring in the idea that there's a mix when we're talking about these modes, because there could be tendencies that are associated with goodness, but there could be a more prevailing, let's say, motive, which could be associated with some of the other modes, like passion or ignorance. So it starts to become a very complicated picture. And again, we just start with kind of black and white just to illustrate the point. It's not necessarily that it's many times going to be black and white. And so these different modes, the mix of modes, really results in the different varieties of species of life, the different types of people, the different preferences. I remember that in college, my suite mate, I lived in SSV, so we had suite mates. It was like 2 rooms with 1 shared bathroom, but the walls were paper thin, so I could hear everything that was going on the other side of the wall. And my suite mate would crank up his music, and I forget what the genre of music is, but it sounds like if you ever hear people in the morning just let out their phlegm from the throat, it sounded like that to me. And to hear that at 3 in the morning was quite an experience. So, you know, there's music like that, and then there's music that might be considered more refined or sophisticated. And different kinds of people like it. And somebody that likes, let's say, very refined or sophisticated music may have other tastes and preferences that are associated with a lower mode in different avenues of life. So it's not even necessarily consistent within a person. So what we can see is there are these different tendencies that prevail. They're constantly fighting for dominance. Like the Bhagavad Gita talks about how sometimes the mode of goodness becomes prominent, defeating the modes of passion and ignorance. And sometimes the mode of passion defeats goodness and ignorance, and at other times ignorance defeats goodness and passion. So in this way, there's always competition for supremacy. So the interesting thing about that is that we can generally be characterized by these different combinations of modes, but it's always in flux. And it's based on a lot of different things to determine which mode is predominating at the time. Like, how many of you have had this experience where at night somebody says something to you that you just don't like, or something happens to you that just didn't sit well with you, or you said something that you thought was very funny, and then the next morning you regretted saying that thing, or the thing that seemed so horrible didn't seem so horrible in the morning. The phrase sometimes of, I slept on it. How many of you have had that experience? Okay, I've had the experience. And that's because the modes of nature are influencing us also partially based on the time of day. So if we look at the day as a cyclical process of morning, day, and evening/nighttime, the parts of the day are characterized or predominated, meaning the influence of a certain mode is a little bit stronger. So in the morning, mode of goodness is a stronger tendency, more likely to prevail. And that's what provides the impetus for, let's think about some of the activities that people do in the morning. Like, what are some things that people do in the morning besides eat breakfast and rush to class? There's exercise, there's meditation or worship or prayer. There's going out on walks. It's generally a slower pace. It's a more thoughtful pace. Okay, let me think about how I want to plan out my day, how I'm going to meet the challenges, how I can best prepare myself for that. So a long-term view. And then the daytime, when most of us are in classes or at work, predominated by mode of passion. And so within that kind of normal structure, these three modes have their place. And then ignorance, the evening, it's winding down. I'm starting to feel sleepy. So for us to function in this world around us, there has to be some kind of succumbing to these different influences. So the characteristic of ignorance or sleep, wanting to dull my ability to perceive what's around me, is a necessary thing in order to sleep, to get rested, to regenerate for the next day. Does that make sense? So it's not necessarily like it's all good or all bad. It's that they have their functions, as long as we're operating within the realm of the rules of this world around us. And so just going back to the idea of what we do in different parts of the day. Well, let's just one more detail about that idea of predominating modes. There's a good reason why a lot of criminal activity happens at night, and why people in general feel safer to walk outside in the mornings, and to most degree during the daytime. It's the influence of the modes, and so the day is structured in a way to accommodate those modes. And then just going back to how the influence of these modes affects our taste. Like one example I want to share, because food is very dear to my heart, and I hope many of us on this call, we at least like to eat. In Bhagavad Gita, in the 17th chapter, text 7 through 10, Krishna describes about the different foods in the different modes of nature. So everything has associated modes with it. So we talked a little bit about music. Now we're going to hear about food. Even the food each person prefers is of three kinds, according to the three modes of material nature. The same is true of sacrifices, austerities, and charity. Now here are the distinctions between them. Foods dear to those in the mode of goodness increase the duration of life, purify one's existence, and give strength, health, happiness, and satisfaction. Such foods are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. Okay, does that sound tasty to everybody?
Yeah.
I'll especially say the last sentence. Such foods are juicy, fatty, wholesome, and pleasing to the heart. Now we'll go into the next statement. Foods that are too bitter, too sour, salty, hot, pungent, dry, and burning are dear to those in the mode of passion. Such foods cause distress, misery, and disease. A little bit of a share here. I used to really love spicy food. Now, I mean, I guess I got a little older and got weak. But so I used to, I wasn't always vegetarian. So once I went to this Chinese restaurant and I ordered this chicken chili dish. And it was like equal parts chicken and whole red chilies. And I was just eating the chilies and like crying and laughing at the same time. And I was just thinking like, wow, you know, and my best friend makes fun of me about that to this day. Now I don't even want to think about like eating that much chili. Like that's, I'm feeling warm thinking about that. But just the idea of like, here's a chili pepper. It was pretty hot. It's burning my tongue, like my mouth is on fire. I'm crying tears, not because I'm so happy, and I'm just laughing. Like that sounds pretty miserable to me, but for some reason I was enjoying it. So at least for me, that resonated as a pretty strong example of what that statement is referring to. Now, the interesting one is the last one. Food prepared more than 3 hours before being eaten. Food that is tasteless, decomposed, and putrid, and food consisting of remnants and untouchable things is dear to those in the mode of darkness. Another example, unless someone else has a good story on that one. In 2007, I went to China for the first time. And my friend was taking me around, and we went to a street food vendor. And he told me, you gotta try this, you gotta try this. I think because he knew how awful it was. It was called chow tofu. And it's fermented tofu that, I won't get too graphic, but it smells exactly like it smells the same coming in as it does going out. No joke. And I ate it. And it was just as awful as I'd imagined it, at least to me. And again, that verse, that statement became very real just thinking back on that. That there are things that are rotten by nature, by design. But what is the quality of that? Rotten, decomposing, no longer having that life-giving quality or energy associated with that food. And if that's what I'm going to be putting into my body, that also influences this filter that I am now using to perceive the world around me. Not saying eating chow tofu is going to make me into an alcoholic that just doesn't want to do anything, not saying that at all. But what I am saying is that these different influences, many of them we have control over, and they do have an effect not just on, in that case, satisfying the stomach or the tongue, but also affecting the other aspects of our lives that resonate with us, the way with which we see things, the filters that are predominating our vision. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, just a little bit of a role play, trying to get in the shoes of other people. Just based on this conversation so far, how do you think a person primarily influenced by passion would see a person in goodness? Like, if a person primarily influenced by the mode of passion saw somebody primarily influenced by the mode of goodness, what would that person's impression be of that person in goodness?
You're not giving it all. You have more potential than you.
Yeah, you're not giving enough. Yeah. What about somebody who's in ignorance who sees somebody in goodness?
Ignorant person seeing person in mode of goodness.
Yeah.
They get irritated.
Yeah.
Oh, irritation is they cannot distract that person or something like that. That's the, I think, more.
Okay. Akhilesh, I think you were saying something?
I was just gonna say, like, maybe, like, yeah, just like they get irritated, but they also, like, this might be a person to take advantage of in the future.
Yeah, they could see opportunity to exploit. That's a great point. They could feel frustrated or irritated. Yeah, because the difference in values is so great. They might also see their life as very boring. Why don't you have a little fun? Change things a bit. Learn to live.
Yes.
Come on. What are you doing? You're wasting your life. You're wasting your youth. And so in that way, within ourselves and between each other, these modes are fighting for dominance. So these inputs that we allow into our lives are extremely influential in the predominating modes acting on us, how we interpret situations. I'm going to go ahead and share this short film, this clip, which I thought was interesting, that just illustrates how easily we can be influenced by our externals. So give me a second.
What many people may not realise is that music is an incredibly important part of film and television. If used correctly, it can enhance the emotions of any scene. For example, the music you're listening to right now is making me seem like the coolest, suavest guy in town. Get that wrong, it sounds like this. What many people may not realise is that music is an incredibly important part of film and television. Do you see what I mean? That was just one example of how music can change the viewer's perspective. Let's have a look at a couple more.
Here's your tea. Oh, cheers. Did you put sugar in this?
Yeah, I did.
We assume the tea drinker isn't very happy with the fact sugar's been put in their tea, because the music is telling us this. However, if we replace the music with something else, we get this.
Did you put sugar in this?
Yeah, I did.
Looks like the sugar wasn't so sinister after all. Let's have a look at another one. Music can affect the way you observe and judge certain characters. The man we just saw seemed like a hero or some sort of leader. But if we change the music, he looks like a villain. And now it looks like he's grieving. But let's try another one.
Okay, well, you get the idea from that. So just curious, what were your thoughts when you were seeing and hearing that? Like, what did you experience?
Like many things combined together as a whole makes our perceptions.
Okay. Did any of you have this experience? Because I did, and I just want to see if I'm the only one. When I was hearing the music, like in some cases, I felt my heart rate changing. And I also started noticing different things. Like that gentleman was showing the same exact footage, but based on the music playing, I was noticing different nuances in the expression and even interpreting the expressions completely differently, although nothing changed.
Yeah. Like when it's in the grief, okay. Like his eyes and the way he looks and all. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's interesting that the modes influence us in the sense of we start to tease out different things from a situation in exchange. So a lot like that image that I showed earlier of the different pictures of the sun, where depending on the lens that we're bringing, the filter that we're bringing to the situation, we can see something entirely in different ways. And so with that in mind, that these modes are fighting, they're introducing all these filters to our vision, to our expression of tastes. A lot of it's driven by the idea that birds of a feather flock together, like attracts like. Like there's a statement, if you want to be a millionaire, hang out with 5 millionaires and you'll be the 6th. Or if you want to cultivate more qualities associated with goodness, hang out with people that already have those qualities. And if we, let's say, aspire for, well, let me first move away from ignorance, and let's say we agree that goodness probably makes the most sense due to stability, long-term happiness, being able to stay more in line with who I am, so that true sense of identity is being good enough, is associating with that mode of goodness good enough. Like, let's think about that question also in relation to things in this world. So everything in this world has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And so if I want to, let's say, or I aspire for a life completely in the mode of passion, or a life completely in the mode of goodness, that also has an expiration date. The nature of this world is things degrade. So what may start out as goodness can morph into passion or even ignorance. That's just how everything in this world functions. And that it's also related to wanting to, like, there's still that attachment that forms. So I identify with that happiness in knowledge. And what that does is it's a higher grade of happiness or satisfaction, but still it has the potency, it's still a filter. It's still obscuring the answer to that question, who am I, and my ability to live according to that understanding of who am I. And so with the Vedic conception, goodness isn't good enough, that we should be moving toward. So goodness is compared to like the window of transcendence. So of the filters, it's the least distorting of the filters. And so it gives us insight into what can be beyond that. So how to live life unfiltered. But we need to go beyond that. And so that's one of the questions that we'll be exploring more next week when we talk about the different learning methods to hopefully take us from wherever we are today to a place where we can see and live life unfiltered. And so goodness takes us closer to our true identity, but things in ignorance and passion tend to take us further away from our true identity. So I asked this question again, this question that we raised in the beginning. Do we have free will? Because if we're all covered in filters, does that mean that's all we can see?
Yes, I guess.
Yes, to which one?
If we are covered in filters and we see things through that.
Okay, but does that mean we have free will? Because whose will is it if we're seeing things through a filter?
No, then that's not a free will. That's like imposed will.
Okay. Other thoughts on that?
I was thinking about the question of like, is goodness enough? That was a question, right?
Yeah.
So I was thinking about it like opening like charity organizations or something like that, or even like making animal shelters or something like that. It is a good cause, but it's not like solving the main problem or something like that, and then it slowly leads to passion and ignorance. So I was just watching some animal documentary like a few weeks ago, and they were at a sanctuary or something, and then to protect those animals, then they need to like rely on passion and ignorance with guns and weapons and ammunitions to protect the animals in general. But they are not using like other means to get rid of it. It's the same like answer of like give a good guy a gun to solve the problem or something like that. That's like a distorted version of goodness in a way.
Yeah, and especially because the influence of the modes isn't stable. So what may seem like a good idea and a good solution to a qualified person doesn't always stay in that way. And what you were pointing out, that it may start out as something influenced by goodness, very quickly can degrade. So yeah, really nice point. And so, okay, so we have the idea that living life with these filters isn't enough to correctly, or to clearly, I should say, identify with my true identity. And so we'll need to unshackle ourselves from the influence of those filters. And Vedant, you were suggesting that the presence of the filters means that we don't really have a whole lot of free will. Do any of you agree or disagree with that idea?
Yeah, I agree with that. Like
Even I agree.
Okay. That brings up a question then. If we don't have free will, what does that mean for responsibility? Does that mean we're always a victim of circumstance?
Yeah, I guess.
What do you think, Vaishali?
It's like it's a limited thing, I think.
Okay.
Like we only have limited free will, not like whatever we want.
Yeah, that's a nice way to balance it out. That there is free will in the sense that I can make a conscious choice
Yeah.
to say yes or no to something, but the filters, the influence of these three modes kind of tips the scale. It doesn't mean it's impossible not to go the other way, but we may be certainly predisposed toward a certain direction. And so there is limited free will. I think that's a great way to put it. And we just don't have that free expression of that free will to really make our own choices. And when I'm saying our own choices, from the perspective of the soul, like if I was to identify myself as a soul, not this body, not this mind, not this whatever temporary designation the circumstance ascribes to me, if I'm acting as a soul, then I can have complete expression of free will, because my actions will be aligned with that true nature of things. So it really then depends on us trying to figure out a way out of this situation, because it seems a bit hopeless that I'm experiencing life with these filters, these different influences that may bias me in a certain way or result in me not seeing or recognizing things that may be good for me. So how do we get out of that situation? And so with this exploration of the three modes, we've touched on a large part of why it's so difficult to live life on the level of the soul rather than the body. And so next week, we're going to start exploring what it might take to be able to get out of that situation so that we can gradually, very gradually, more and more, see things as they are, be able to respond rather than react from the platform of the soul, my true identity. And so stay tuned. Any closing thoughts or comments or anything you'd like to share? Okay.
This is like not for beginners, I guess, and none of us are. There's this new bhakta at Sanctuary, and he asked me this question of like, what's wrong with listening to music? What's wrong with listening to non-devotee music? So I was like, I mean, because he was listening to a lot of stuff before he came and started living at Sanctuary. So I was like, I'll give an answer later, but but what could you say to him?
A lot of it, I think, just depends on where he's at, where he's coming from, kind of a thing. I also had that same question though, so it's kind of nice to see things full circle. Because I loved classical music, and I always thought of it as something very, like they're spine-tingling moments, and just pieces so beautiful that sometimes I would tear up. And I was thinking, like, how can something like this not be good for me? And then my mentor was very patient, and he didn't say, like, throw all my CDs away or anything like that, or just stop cold turkey or anything like that. He just kind of gave me my space to explore it a little bit more, and I just kept hearing and doing other things. And then one day it just hit me. And it's a point that we talked about in this discussion where the nature of things is to degrade. So I realized that when I would go and hear my classical music, it would start out fine. And then it would gradually move into, I also liked a lot of rock music or a lot of other things that maybe aren't so much predominated by mode of goodness. And I would see that my mind would always go in that direction after going here, starting in that area of goodness. And so I was seeing it as like, oh, even if it starts there, it ends up here. So best just not to start here, just to protect myself and avoid that. But each person is different in terms of what makes sense. I'm just sharing what my experience was and kind of the space I was given to come to that conclusion or that understanding.
Yeah.
What's your take?
Yeah, when we were going together somewhere, and I said I don't listen to this stuff, and he was shell shocked by it, and I just said like I like other stuff, and like that other stuff is kirtan, so I prefer that music over this. That was my straight away answer to it. Because I like that more. But yeah, like some people are they just love it more. They just love that music more.
Yeah. And I'm guessing that if you were to ask the you 15 years ago, would you give that answer?
No.
That you prefer this music over that?
No.
Okay. So there was space for personal evolution.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that makes sense that you clearly express where you're at.
Yeah, and I also said like some like it's like I'm like one of the people who might just like only resort to this music, but I know there are a lot of devotees who also listen to non-devotee music, and like they like it more, so it's like fine with it. Because he was feeling like a bit like left out by it.
Yeah, it's very much something that has to come from inside. It's not something that we can like just go around and beat people over the head like, oh, this isn't da-da-da-da. Because it really comes out of how much am I convinced that this is what it'll take for me to live an unfiltered life. And even if something seems nice, like as an example, there was this anime show that I absolutely loved. And one day I was like, okay, I don't think this is really good for me long term. So let me just say goodbye to it. And a couple years later, I picked it up and I watched 1 or 2 episodes, and then I was struck by like, wow, this isn't as good as I remember it. So just giving yourself space also to just kind of develop your tastes and, new preferences according to like a higher understanding or a higher taste can also be helpful. So just allowing myself the space to really just take a pause and then revisit and see firsthand it wasn't everything I thought it would be.
What was the show?
Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah, I guess.
All right. All right. Anything else? Otherwise, we'll break for today. All right. Thank you so much, everyone. We'll talk next week, if not sooner.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.